Well, we're in the second part of the series, Speak Easy. And at the end of part one, I gave all of us, me included, just a little bit of homework. And the homework was simple. It was, this question. Why did I say what I said and how I said it? It's the question that I encourage all of us throughout the course of this entire past week to ask ourselves in every conversation, in every verbal engagement, in every reply, whether it's email or text message or social media, to just lens through this question. Why did I say, not just what I said, the words I chose to use or the words I chose not to use, but how I said it? Because that starts to reveal really what's going on underneath the service. So I got done. It was a 10:45 service at the Du Bois campus. I had just delivered that message to that group of people. And I just tell you, I got off stage and it was approximately, and these times are approximate, by the way. I didn't have a stopwatch, but approximately the service ended around 11:51. I do what I do every week. I'm down in front to be available to pray and connect with people. So I started praying with people, and it was a whole myriad of just, people are just facing life. Right around 59, there's a new couple that just started coming to the Du Bois campus, and I connected with them, and awesome couple, and they started sharing some of their story, and they had another part of their story that was really encouraging to me as a dad. It was a really cool moment, and well, then I knew there was someone else kind of waiting for me, so I made my way out of the auditorium, and I had this leadership conversation. This person, God's just stirring in their heart, and they just want to share with me and get some insight on maybe what some possible next steps could look like. So I had that conversation with them, and by 12:25, I found myself making my way back to my desk to sit, and I just took a big breath. It was a great Sunday morning. But Sunday mornings for me, I wake up early, and it is just like the gas pedal gets slammed down. I just go. So sitting there, I'm exhausted in all the good ways to be exhausted. I'm tired. Well, my wife was wrapping some things up, too, in her leadership sphere, and I had heard her talking with a couple as I made my way back to the desk, and so I knew she was trying to wrap things up, and so I was doing some things on my computer, and somewhere around, 12:49, I tried to call her. It rang, and it finally went to her voicemail. She didn't answer her phone, which is not uncommon, by the way. I continued to do some things at my desk, and, this is the one time I know is extremely accurate because I looked at my phone this week and I looked at her text messages. At 1:03, I text her, not once, not twice. I'm talking 4, 5, 6 times. They were kind of fun, kind of sarcastic, kind of like, ha, ha, but let's go. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I want my afternoon nap. It's time to go. I continued to do a few more things, and around, 10 after 1, she hadn't called me back, and she hadn't texted me back, so I got up from my desk, and now I'm exhausted. It's time to go home. So I walked around the building to find her, and I found her, and when I saw her, she goes, "Why are you still here?" Now, I want to pause in the story. None of this is bad her or bad me. We've both been leading all Sunday morning. We've been both doing what, we're kind of responsible to do. This is nothing to do with her or me. This is just situational life. And she looks at me, she was like, "Why are you still here?" I'm like, I thought we were going to drive home together. And she goes, "No, I have my car and you have your truck." Now, there's a backstory to all of that confusion. Again, it was no bad anyone. But it hit me like a rock. And by 1:11, my emotions, my words, it was like red alert. I'm like, I've been sitting there for 45 minutes when I could have been home. I could have already eaten something and already been in my Sunday afternoon nap. And I felt all of that coming rushing into my mouth. And all of a sudden, God tapped me on the shoulder. It's like, what are you going to do, Chris? What are you going to do? What are you going to say in this moment? And I just turned around and as I was walking away, I said, I'm not going to live out what I just talked about. And I kind of laughed to myself because, that was filled with sarcasm. It was my way of saying, okay, fine, I will live out what I just talked about, but I don't want to. That was Sunday. You see, here's what I know in this series, Speak Easy. There's going to be a lot of uneasy moments. For me and for you. And the thing I want you to do is I want you to lean into those uneasy moments. Just like I had to on Sunday. I had a decision to make. I had a choice to make. There was a whole lot of things I wanted to say in that moment. And God was like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I was just like, okay, Chris, just calm down. It's not a big deal. Just walk away. Get in your truck. Go home. Eat something. Take a nap. Life is fine. You see, in part 1, we looked at some words that James, the brother of Jesus, wrote. We looked specifically in James chapter 3. But there's something else that James wrote right at the very beginning of this book or this letter that he wrote. And it's this off thought that really kind of like sets up where he's going to go later in the book in chapter 3, what we looked at in part 1. And this is what he wrote. He said, those who consider themselves religious, those who say they will place their faith and trust in Jesus, those who are followers, Christ followers, right? Those who consider themselves to be religious and, yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues. Again, James is going to be so direct. He goes, hey, you consider yourself to be a Christ follower and you don't rein in your tongue. Deceive themselves, lie to themselves, fool themselves. And their religion, their faith is, again, I hope this makes you feel uneasy because it makes me feel uneasy. The religion is worthless. I think about that moment last Sunday. I was on the brink of just allowing my tongue to just go. And I'm thankful that in that moment, God just kind of tapped me and said, are you going to actually live out what you've talked about? Are you going to actually put into practice what you've just encouraged all the churches, TCC churches, to live out? What say you, Chris? What say you? You see, it's in those uneasy moments. And what James is trying to do is to create that tension within all of us to say, really, is your faith worthless? Because what you say and how you say it really reflects your faith in God. Now, I mentioned that parts 2 and 3, we're going to be focusing on what I've simply labeled the destructive 4. And the destructive 4 are just 4 of the main areas. James says in James 3 that our tongue sets a forest on fire. A small spark sets it on fire. And that's the damage that our tongue can do. And that's why this is so critical in our faith journey and in our relationships. Like those two things are just so intricately connected together. And so we're going to be looking at 2 today in part 2 and then the next 2 in part 3. So today we're going to start off with, drum roll please, complaining. Now, as we make our way through these 4, my encouragement, don't deflect, but reflect. You're going to want to, as we make our way through all of these 4, destructive ways our tongue sets things on fire. You're going to want to deflect on that person who you know who does that one. You're going to start thinking of stories of how that person talked to you, how that person sent you that message, who you know that does. You're going to want to deflect on everyone else. And I just want to encourage you, reflect on you. Again, you can't change anyone except for you. And blaming other people will never help you grow. And there's going to be very specific areas in all 4 of these that God wants to get your attention to help you grow because he loves you. So don't deflect. Reflect on your life. So let's look at the first one. The first one is complaining. And experts tell us that the average person, again, some might be a little bit more, some might be a little less, but the average person complains one time per minute while in a conversation. So while you're in a conversation, on average, we speak some 16,000 words a day, and most of those words, I'm guessing, are going to be in conversation with someone, unless you talk to yourself a lot. But that we complain one time per minute, and it's somewhere between 15 to 30 times per day. That's a whole lot of complaining. And again, all of us are somewhere around that average. Again, some a lot more, some a lot less, but still within that average. And experts have done a lot of research around the impact of complaining on our physical bodies. In fact, research that's anchored to a Stanford study, they shared that the more you complain, the more it shrinks your brain, or specifically the hippocampus. That part of your brain, the hippocampus, is all about it. It helps with new memories. It helps with emotions, feelings. And so that part of the brain, as you complain and the more you complain, it actually starts to shrink it, which is fascinating to think about the impact that complaining has on our brain. Researchers have also said that when you complain, it releases cortisol. Cortisol is that stress hormone. It's the same stress hormone that's released in our fight or flight response, right? When you encounter a bear and you're like, I'm either going to fight that bear or run from that bear, right? That's that fight or flight response. And, oh, by the way, it's the same thing that's released with anxiety, right? When you don't see that threat right in front of you, but you think there might be, right? That's anxiety. We think there might be. Fear is, I see it. But cortisol is released when we complain. And new research is coming out, and they're learning more and more about what they call neural mirroring. Neural mirroring has everything to do with when you're in a conversation or connected in some way with another person, that all of a sudden your brain starts to mimic that person, what they're saying and what they're feeling. In fact, what they're tying neural mirroring to is to empathy. And empathy gets played out in a lot of different ways, right? You could be watching a video of someone who's running a race and they cross the finish line and they collapse out of emotion, and someone runs up and gives them a hug and they help them up, and you find yourself, right? You find all of your emotion, right, starting to mirror what they're going through. You might not even know the person, but there's something about that moment. That's neural mirroring. And researchers are discovering that when you are listening to someone complain, maybe you're reading a post online on social media, or you're just listening to someone complain, that all of a sudden your brain starts to mimic, to mirror their complaints. I read this one article, and they equated it to sitting by someone who's smoking, right? You sit next to someone who's smoking. You're never smoking a cigarette, but you're sitting next to them, and the damage from secondhand smoke. And they said you wouldn't sit there all day locked up in a room with someone smoking. They're like, that's what happens with complaining. When you're sitting next to someone complaining, all of a sudden the devastating impact, just like secondhand smoke, the devastating impact from complaining impacts that person listening to the complaining. Why? Neural mirroring. That's why not only are you around, when you're around people who complain, it impacts you, but when you complain, guess what happens? It doesn't just impact yourself. When you complain, now it impacts every person that's listening to your or reading your complaint. That's the devastating impact of complaining. You think about what James says about the damage the tongue does. It's real. And beyond all the science, all the studies, What does complaining actually solve? The answer is simple. You know the answer. Complaining solves nothing. But we do it. I mean, there's a whole lot of complaining going on within our communities, isn't there? It's everywhere. Again, if you believe the studies, it's one time per minute in conversation, 15 to 30 times a day. There's a lot of complaining going on, and it solves nothing. Doesn't help anyone. In fact, it wreaks havoc within you. I mean, shrinking your brain and those listening to you. Now, maybe you're wondering to yourself, is there a time or place to complain, right? You encounter a situation that's frustrating. You encounter a scenario and it just has you worked up. Is there time and place? And yes, there are times and place. In fact, one of the most important things to understand is they call it a complaint sandwich. How you start it and how you end it, those are the two pieces of bread, right? You put the complaint in the middle and the two pieces of bread, that's so critical. And I'll get to, what the two pieces of bread are in a moment. But they're like, yeah. Just do a complaint sandwich. Start with, I'll get to that in a minute, air out your complaint, and then sandwich it with, the other slice of bread, right? Make a complaint sandwich. And it's about who you share with. One of the things I try to do is when I'm in that, frustrated mood, sometimes I just call it out. Hey, I just want to complain for a moment. It's all it is. I just need to let this off. But it's to who? And the who is so important. Because usually I find that person who's just going to go, okay, you're being, and they'll insert a nice adjective to fill in what I'm being, and I'll say, yeah, you're right, I just need to get over it, or I just need to move through it, or I just need to solve it, or I just need to, right? You need that person who's not going to add to your complaining, but actually helps you just to vent it and then move through it. And so many times in the complaining process, we start with attacking the problem, right? We talk about the problem, and then quickly, and this is what complaining does, it moves to the person. And my encouragement for you, same thing encouragement for me, is attack the problem, not the person. But complaining, almost every time I hear a complaint, especially in social media, that's like the worst space for it, right? Someone posts something, and they're attacking a problem, they're highlighting a problem, they're highlighting a frustration, and almost immediately, someone or someone's, they shift from the problem to the person, and now it all becomes about tearing apart people, doesn't it? It's where our complaints go. And that's why my challenge is this, is let's solve the problem, let's attack the problem, but come on, let's not attack the person. There's 3 questions that I've tried to. This is kind of the grid work when it comes to when I get frustrated with something, when I encounter a situation or scenario that just has me a little frazzled, These are the 3 questions I try to ask myself all the time. And all 3 are interconnected together. All 3 are critical. Like, don't leave one out. First question I ask myself is this: do I have all the information? Do I have all the information? Most of the time when you're frustrated with something, you just don't have all the information. Or when someone complains to you about something, they don't have all the information, and now you really don't have all the information. And so I go on a fact-finding mission to gain more information, because more information will start to help paint a picture that's more accurate than what I'm receiving in the moment. Which leads to the second question I ask: what perspective do I need to gain? So many times I have only one limited perspective on a situation, especially if I don't have all the information. And so as a leader, I try to gain a fuller perspective, to look at it from a different angle, to try to find some other people that maybe have a different perspective with different information for me to help understand what this situation is really about, which usually by step 2, right, all of a sudden all of that frustration starts to settle because I'm gaining more insight about, what had me frustrated. But that takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes investing yourself into the situation, which leads to number 3. Am I willing to be part of the solution? And this is where the vast majority of people don't even attempt. This is just a whole lot of leadership. People want to sit on the sidelines and complain, but they don't want to invest themselves. They don't want to be part of the solution. They want to point out everything from their very limited perspective and their very limited information source. And they want to sit on the sidelines, right? We know this intuitively. But I'm just telling you, if you want to complain less and be on the active solution side, all three of these questions. And now you got to invest yourself to help. So before you just launch a complaint, just pause for a moment. Do I have all the information? What other perspective do I need to gain? And am I willing to invest myself to help this situation, this scenario, this interaction? Am I willing? Now, maybe you're thinking to yourself right now, maybe a complaint is forming within you, and you're thinking to yourself, well, this feels more like a self-help talk, not a sermon, not a message. Where's the Bible? I'm getting to it right now. Here's what's interesting when it comes to the destructive four. The Bible is really clear and really succinct when it comes to it. For instance, Jesus, when it comes to complaining, another word is grumbling and complaining, same thing. You know what Jesus said? Stop. There you go. Stop. Next time you want to grumble and you're like, what does the Bible say? Stop. Right? Memorize 2 words. Memorize. Just stop. Jesus goes, stop grumbling. In fact, the group was grumbling, complaining about Jesus, and they were complaining loud enough on purpose so Jesus could hear. And he's just like, will you stop? Next time you go to complain, just stop. Next time someone comes to you and they just want to complain, they don't want more information, they don't want a different perspective, they don't want to be part of the solution, just tell them, stop. Stop. It doesn't do any good. In fact, it's going to hurt you and hurt me. I don't want to be a part of it. Just stop. The Apostle Paul put it this way: do everything without grumbling. Do everything without complaining. Again, right, we don't need a lot of Bible verses. It's that clear. Let's just stop. Now, I mentioned that one of the ways to handle a complaint, if you feel like you just got to get that frustration, is to make a complaint sandwich. And I talked about the 2 pieces of bread. It's the same action. And you know what those 2 actions that are the same are? Gratitude. Start with gratitude. Start what you're thankful about. Release the frustration of the complaint. Hey, I'm so thankful for, I'm really frustrated with, and I'm thankful for. Gratitude will help shape that complaint. Gratitude will lift your head up. Start to diffuse some of that raw, red-line emotion and help give you perspective. Gratitude is the solution for complaining. And the experts tell us, and the Bible tells us, right? Just lift your eyes. Gain perspective. God's good. God's leading. Yeah, this might be frustrating, but hey, let's solve it together. So destructive 4, number 1, complaining, which leads to destructive 4, number 2, which is lying. Now, lying was one of those things in my life that I struggled with junior high into high school, early years of high school. I mean, I was lying about everything. And I remember there was this period of time where all of a sudden it was hitting this kind of epic crescendo in my house. My parents were on me left and right because I just literally started lying about everything. And then all of a sudden it came to the explosion point. One day we were all getting ready to go somewhere. My mom and dad had asked me to clean my room. Now, the house growing up, this is not to scale, obviously. My house growing up had one long hallway. It was a ranch house, one long hallway. And at the end of the hallway were the 3 main bedrooms. On the right of the hallway was my parents' bedroom. At the very end was my sister's bedroom, and mine was on the left. And remember, my parents were like, hey, clean your room before we leave. I walked out of my room, and I was standing right there. I'd shut the door behind me, and all of a sudden my mom opened up her door. She was getting ready to put her earrings in. I'll never forget, she looked at me. She goes, hey, Chris, have you cleaned your room? I am like 3 inches from my door. That's shut. And I look at her, and without blinking, I said, yes. And my mom reached around me, opened my door, and it looked like a tornado had gone through my room. I mean, I'm talking, you couldn't see the floor. It was so dirty. And I'll never forget that moment because it was such a clear moment for me. It's like, man, I'm lying about everything. I mean, how ridiculous. I mean, she literally just had to reach around to open the door to see. There's no way I could have hid that lie. In that moment, my parents just looked at me, and I lost all trust. And it took years to rebuild trust with them. And again, the Bible is just so clear when it comes to these destructive ways our tongue sets our relationships on fire. I mean, the 9th commandment, the Big 10, the 10 commandments, the 9th one. I mean, the Cliff Note version is don't lie. The exact phrase is don't give false testimony about your neighbor. That's a long way to say just don't lie. King Solomon wrote in Proverbs, he talks about the 6 things God hates, the 7 things that are detestable to God. And on that list is a lying tongue. I mean, right? This is underneath the big 10 commandments, don't lie. It's underneath the things that God hates, that is detestable to God, is lying. And so many times when we talk about lying, we focus in on the macro lies, like me standing outside of my bedroom door with the door shut, knowing that a tornado had hit it and you couldn't see the floor. Like, that's a macro lie. And so many times we think about lying in that sense. But I want to change one letter. Why? Because words matter. Because I think the most damaging of all the lies isn't the macro lies, because those are easy to be seen. The macro lies, you're going to get caught. One day, it's all going to come out. But it's the micro lies. We call them white lies or the half-truths or, oh, we're just positioning, or I didn't really want to. I didn't want to hurt that person, so I said it this way. Or I didn't know how to say no because I didn't want to hurt you, right? Like we always just kind of position, and at the end of the day, it's a lie. Whether it's a macro lie or a micro lie, they're all lies. They're not the truth. But we start positioning our words. We start playing games with our words. We start saying some words and holding some words back. We start shaping our words so that we'll shape the narrative that we want someone to know or what we want someone not to know. And all of this world is in this micro lie world. In all reality, a micro lie is a lie. And micro lies are so damaging. Why? Because they're all about self-preservation. We're trying to preserve ourselves. We're trying to hide a part or pieces of ourselves. We're trying to keep ourselves, safe. We're trying to keep ourselves distanced. We're trying to, elevate ourselves in a way to look good to someone or make sure they don't understand what we're really going through so we don't look bad. It's about how do I keep myself safe? And as we're focused on our self-preservation, we start to position ourselves. It's about elevating ourselves and pushing someone else down. It's why Jesus over and over again came back to humility. That humility is about lowering yourself to lift others up. That humility is really what love looks like. And when we start positioning micro lies, is about, I want to preserve myself and position me to look better, to be better than you. I want to hide something so you can't see into me. I want to create this outward image that I want you to see. In all reality, that image isn't true. It's why I started this message with sharing a real life story. Because it's just real. Like, these are the things I'm facing every day. It's the same thing for you. Like the storylines look different, but the reality is our tongue is such a dangerous weapon, and we need to recognize it. And you see our micro lies, it all leads to polarization. They polarize relationships. Again, macro lies at some point. The big lies, that person's going to be found out. It's just a matter of time. If you're trying to hide a macro lie right now, you know what those are. At some point, it is going to come to a surface. Someone's going to read that. They're going to find out. They're going to see that receipt. Like, they're going to find it out. The micro lies, we can keep those hidden a lot. But in all reality, every micro lie we tell, we're creating this polarization between ourselves and those around us. You see, I think about these two of the destructive four, complaining and lying. And here's what I know. Again, the Bible is so succinct and so clear. And just like Jesus said, stop grumbling. Paul said, do everything without complaining. Just like God said, hey, don't lie. It is that easy and that difficult, isn't it? But all of this gets attached to, well, what Jesus said. The greatest of all the commandments is to love God and to love people, to love each other. In fact, these two are one and the same. The more you love God is the more you'll love people. And the more you love people is the more you'll understand what it's like to love God. Like both of these, love God and love people, are so intricately connected together. You see, I think about part 1, we looked at James chapter 3. In James chapter 3, because with the tongue we praise our Lord, right? It's an expression of our love to God and Father. And with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. You see, when we start complaining about people, whether we know them or we really don't know them, when we start attacking people, not the problem, we have to realize we're attacking people who are made in God's image, and God has called us to love, to put love into action. And the more we love God, the more we'll love people. And the more we love people, the more we'll understand our love for God. Those things are so intricately connected together. And when we lie, we create this polarization between people, whether they recognize it or not. It's not what love looks like. And so this is the question I want you to ask yourself. When you start to complain, just ask yourself, what does love look like? Does this look like love? The love that God has called us to love. When you start to tell one of those micro lies, when you're positioning a story, positioning words, creating gaps in the narrative, just ask yourself, is this what love looks like? Is this the love that God has called me to? Because Jesus said, the greatest command, the greatest law is to love. And when we complain, it doesn't look like love. And when we lie, no matter how big or how small the lie is, it doesn't look like love. Ask that question this week. What does love look like? Let's pray. Lord, I just pray that we will put love into motion. Lord, I pray that we will, in every word, ask yourself, does that word look like love? Does it reflect what you have called us to love like? To love you and to love all people who are created in your image. So Lord, may we love like that. In your name I pray.